The morning sun filtered through the dusty blinds of the small apartment as Maylene opened her eyes. Another day at the prestigious Golden Harmony Music Academy awaited her. She sighed, pushing back the worn quilt her grandmother had made years ago. The familiar sounds of the old tea kettle whistling from the kitchen told her that Nai was already awake. "May, your tea is getting cold," her grandmother called out in her gentle voice. May quickly dressed in her simple gray skirt and white blouse, the unofficial uniform she'd adopted for her job as an administrative assistant at the academy. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make her stand out. That's how she preferred it. In the tiny kitchen, her grandmother sat at their small table, her fingers slightly bent from arthritis, but still elegant as they wrapped around her teacup. The old piano that dominated half their living room seemed to watch over them like a silent guardian. "You look tired," Nai observed, pushing a plate of steamed buns toward her granddaughter. "Were you up late again?" May nodded, taking a small bite. "End of quarter reports. Mr. Wong needed them finished before today's board meeting." She glanced at the clock. "I should hurry. The morning rush will be terrible." Her grandmother's eyes drifted to the piano. "You haven't played in weeks." "I haven't had time," May answered quickly, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. Time wasn't what she lacked. It was courage. The bus ride to the academy took 30 minutes, time May spent reviewing notes for the day ahead. Golden Harmony was hosting its annual fundraising gala this weekend, and as the assistant to the administrative director, she was responsible for coordinating countless details. The event always attracted the city's elite, wealthy donors, accomplished musicians, and influential arts patrons. When she arrived at the academy, the grand building with its imposing columns and marble steps still made her feel small, even after 3 years of employment. Students carrying instrument cases rushed past her, their expensive clothes and confident strides marking them as belonging in a way May never felt she did. "Lin, just the person I needed to see," called Mr. Wong, her boss, as she settled at her desk. He was a short, energetic man with round glasses that constantly slid down his nose. "The gala preparations, how are we looking?" "Everything's on schedule, sir," she replied, pulling up the detailed spreadsheet she'd created. "The caterers confirmed yesterday. The string quartet for the reception is set, and the flowers will arrive at noon on Saturday." "Excellent, excellent." He nodded but then hesitated, adjusting his glasses. "There's one more thing. I need you to attend the gala this year." May felt her stomach drop. "Attend? But I usually just help with setup and then leave before the guests arrive." "I understand, but Ms. Zhao is on maternity leave, and I need someone to manage the check-in table and handle any issues that arise during the event." He must have noticed her discomfort because he added, "It's just for this year and the board approved overtime pay." The mention of extra pay settled the matter. Nai's medication was expensive, and their rent had increased again last month. "Of course, Mr. Wong, I'll be there." "Wonderful. Oh, and Lin, perhaps something a bit more." He gestured vaguely at her outfit. "Formal? It is our biggest fundraiser of the year." After he left, May sank back in her chair. The thought of spending an entire evening among the academy's elite made her palms sweat. And now she needed to find something to wear? Her wardrobe consisted mainly of practical, unmemorable clothes, perfect for someone who preferred to blend into the background. During her lunch break, she called her grandmother. "A gala? How exciting!" Nai exclaimed. "It's not exciting, it's terrifying," May corrected her. "I'll be surrounded by famous musicians and wealthy people who donate more money in one night than I make in a year. You belong there as much as anyone," her grandmother said firmly. "Remember, before my accident, I performed in concert halls across the country. Music doesn't belong only to the rich or famous." May glanced around to make sure no one could hear her. "That was different. You were talented. I just file paperwork and answer phones." "And who taught you to play Chopin when you were just 8 years old? Who watched you master Beethoven by 12? "That was a long time ago," May whispered. "I haven't seriously played in years." "The music doesn't leave you, little sparrow. It waits. After hanging up, May found herself facing another problem. Professor Chen, the academy's most demanding piano instructor, was storming toward her desk, his face flushed with anger. "The practice room I reserved for my master class has been double booked," he fumed. "This is unacceptable." May quickly pulled up the reservation system. "I'm so sorry, Professor. There seems to have been a glitch in the system. Let me find you another room immediately." He huffed impatiently as she made several calls. "Room 310 is available. It's actually larger than your original room and has the Steinway Grand you prefer." His anger subsided slightly. "Fine. But make sure this doesn't happen again." As he walked away, she overheard him muttering to a colleague, "The help gets less competent every year." The comment stung, but May was used to being invisible, to being seen as merely the help. In a way, it was safer. No expectations meant no disappointments. That evening she stayed late, finalizing seating arrangements for the gala. The academy was quiet, most students and faculty long gone. On her way out, she passed the main recital hall where the gala would be held. The door was unlocked and she slipped inside. The grand piano sat center stage, gleaming under a single spotlight that was always left on. The ghost light, as performers called it. The rows of empty seats seemed to be watching her. Almost without thinking, May walked to the stage and approached the piano. This was the Academy's pride, a concert grand worth more than everything she owned combined. Her fingers hovered over the keys, not touching, just feeling the pull of them. "Do you play?" a voice asked, startling her so badly she nearly fell. The night janitor, an elderly man named Mr. Lee, stood in the doorway with his cleaning cart. "No, I mean, not really. Not anymore," she stammered. He smiled kindly. "Shame. This one has a beautiful voice. Needs someone who can make it sing." He gestured to the piano. "Go ahead. No one's here but us." "I couldn't," she said, already backing away. "Suit yourself." He shrugged. "But sometimes the things we're most afraid of are exactly what we need to face." On her way home, his words echoed in her mind along with her grandmother's. "The music doesn't leave you. It waits." That night, after making sure Nai had taken her medicine and gone to bed, May sat at their old piano. The keys were slightly yellowed with age, some of them sticking occasionally, but it was still in tune. She placed her fingers on the cool ivory and began to play softly, a simple Chopin nocturne that had been her grandmother's favorite. The music came back to her like an old friend, hesitant at first, then more confidently. For the first time in months, she felt something inside her stir, a part of herself she'd locked away, afraid to acknowledge. Little did she know that in 3 days' time, at the gala she dreaded attending, this hidden part of her would change everything. The night of the gala arrived with a sudden downpour, turning the city streets into rivers of reflected light. May stood before the small mirror in her apartment, hardly recognizing herself. After work yesterday, she had visited a second-hand shop and found a simple black dress that fit her slender frame surprisingly well. It wasn't designer fashion, but it was elegant in its simplicity. "You look beautiful," her grandmother said from the doorway, leaning on her walking cane. May turned, uncertain. "It's not too plain?" Nai approached and adjusted the jade pendant around May's neck, a family heirloom passed down through generations. "This was mine when I performed at the Shanghai Concert Hall for the first time. Now it will bring you luck." "I'm not performing, Nai," May reminded her with a gentle smile. "I'm just checking coats and directing wealthy people to their tables." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Life has its own music. Sometimes we don't know when we'll be called to play our part." May arrived at the academy an hour early, grateful to have time to prepare before guests arrived. The grand hall had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers bathed everything in warm golden light. Flowers adorned every table, their sweet scent mixing with the smell of polished wood and anticipation. The stage at the front held a magnificent grand piano, freshly polished until it gleamed like black water. Mr. Wang hurried over, looking harried but pleased. Lynn. Excellent timing. The guest list is at the welcome table. The name cards for the donors are color-coded by giving level. Gold for platinum members, silver for... I have the chart you sent, Mr. Wong, May assured him. Everything is organized. He seemed about to say more when the first guests began to arrive, and soon May was swept up in the flurry of welcomes and directions. She recognized many famous faces from the music world. Renowned teachers, former students who had gone on to international fame, wealthy patrons whose names adorned practice rooms and scholarships. She worked efficiently, her natural quietness, allowing her to fade into the background even as she ensured everything ran smoothly. Twice she caught Mr. Wong looking at her with surprised approval. The evening seemed to be proceeding perfectly, until Professor Victoria Wang arrived. Victoria was the Academy's star piano instructor, known as much for her cutting remarks as for her technical brilliance. Tall and imposing in a deep red gown, she swept into the hall like royalty, a circle of admirers trailing in her wake. "Where is my table?" she demanded when she reached May. "I specifically requested to be seated near Director Zhou." May checked the seating chart. "Yes, Professor Wang. You're at table 3, just to the right of the stage." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied May. "Don't I know you? You're one of the office staff, aren't you? How unusual to see you here." "I'm helping with the event tonight," May explained, trying to keep her voice steady. Victoria's gaze traveled over May's dress with a dismissive flick. "Well, I suppose everyone has their place." She turned away, pausing only to add, "Table 3, you said? Ensure my champagne glass is kept full." As the evening progressed, May found herself running between the kitchen, the welcome table, and the hall, solving small problems before most guests even noticed them. When a donor spilled wine on the tablecloth, she quietly replaced it. When the temperature in the room grew too warm, she discreetly adjusted the thermostat. Dinner was served, followed by speeches from the director and board members about the importance of supporting the arts. May finally took a moment to rest, standing against the back wall as dessert was being served. Mr. Lee, the janitor she'd spoken with days earlier, appeared beside her in a pressed uniform. "You're doing good work tonight," he said kindly, "though I bet you wish you were sitting out there instead of standing here." May shook her head. "Not really. I'm more comfortable in the background." "Sometimes the background is where the most interesting things happen," he replied with a wink before moving away to attend to a small spill. After dessert came the entertainment portion of the evening. 3 advanced students performed, showcasing the Academy's talent. The audience applauded, politely, checkbooks ready to support such promising musicians. Then Director Zhou took the stage again. "And now, as tradition dictates, our faculty will share their gifts as well." One by one, instructors performed brief but impressive pieces. The crowd grew warm with wine and music, the atmosphere loose and appreciative. Victoria Wang played last among the faculty, her fingers flying across the keys in a technically flawless but somehow cold rendition of Liszt. The thunderous applause had barely died down when Victoria, flushed with success and several glasses of champagne, stood again and raised her hand for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called out, her voice carrying clearly through the hall, "we've heard from our students and faculty, but I think we're missing something." She paused dramatically. "What about our support staff?" A confused murmur ran through the crowd. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Surely the people who keep our academy running have hidden talents too. After all, they're surrounded by music every day." Director Zhou looked uncomfortable. "Victoria, I don't think—" "No, I'm serious," she insisted, turning to scan the room. Her gaze landed on May, who was trying to become invisible against the wall. "You there, office girl, why don't you come up and entertain us too?" The room fell silent. All heads turned toward May, who felt the blood drain from her face. I'm not a performer," she managed to say. Victoria's laugh was like breaking glass. "Of course you're not, dear. That's rather the point. But surely you must have picked up something working here all this time. Come now, don't be shy." Mr. Wong stepped forward. "Professor Wang, Ms. Lin is here in a professional capacity to assist with the event, and she'll be assisting by providing a moment of light-hearted entertainment, Victoria replied smoothly. She turned to the donors at her table. Don't you agree it would be charming? A little reminder of how the Academy touches everyone who works here, not just the students? Several guests nodded, curious now, caught up in Victoria's suggestion. Yes, let's hear the office girl play, called out one elderly donor, his voice thick with wine and amusement. May wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Her heart hammered so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Around the room she saw a mix of expressions: embarrassment, curiosity, and on some faces, the beginning of cruel anticipation for what they assumed would be an awkward performance. Victoria was already walking toward her, hand outstretched as if to lead a child. Come along, just a simple piece. Surely you can manage chopsticks or heart and soul? Her voice dropped to a stage whisper, still audible to those nearby. Consider it job security. Our donors love to feel generous, especially to less fortunate talents. Mr. Lee appeared suddenly at May's side. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. May looked around the room, at the waiting faces, at Victoria's smug smile, at the gleaming piano on stage. Something shifted inside her, a quiet determination replacing her initial fear. Actually, she said softly, I think I do. A heavy silence filled the hall as May walked toward the stage. Each step felt like moving through water, her grandmother's jade pendant cool against her skin. She could feel every eye on her, hear the whispers behind raised hands. Someone snickered. Someone else whispered, This should be good, with unmistakable mockery. Victoria stood center stage, a triumphant smile playing on her lips as she waited. When May reached the steps, Victoria took her arm in a grip that appeared helpful but felt controlling. Don't worry, Victoria said loudly enough for the front tables to hear. We'll all be very supportive. The way she emphasized the last word made it clear she expected failure. Director Zhou moved forward, concern etched on his face. Professor Wang, I don't think this is appropriate. Ms. Lin is here as staff, not as a performer. Victoria waved, his concern away. Nonsense, we're all family at Golden Harmony, aren't we? Besides, our donors came to be entertained. She turned to the audience. Isn't that right? There were scattered nods and murmurs of agreement from those too drunk or insensitive to recognize the cruelty unfolding. Others looked uncomfortable but remained silent. May reached the piano bench and stood beside it, not yet sitting. The magnificent, grand piano loomed before her like a mountain to climb. The spotlight felt hot on her skin, and for a moment she considered walking off stage, out of the building, and never returning. 3 years of hard work at the Academy would be lost, but at least her dignity might remain intact. Then she spotted Mr. Lee at the back of the room. The old janitor gave her a small, encouraging nod. Beside him stood Mr. Wang, her boss, looking mortified by the situation but helpless to stop it now that it had gained momentum. Victoria gestured grandly toward the piano. Perhaps something simple? Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I'm sure we can find some sheet music for beginners if you need it. A few more chuckles rippled through the audience. May felt heat rising in her cheeks, but it wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was something else. Something that had been dormant for two. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. The music doesn't leave you, it waits. Taking a deep breath, May sat down at the bench and adjusted it with the practiced motion of someone who had done so thousands of times. The small movement wasn't lost on a few of the more observant musicians in the room, whose expressions shifted from amusement to curiosity. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingers. For a moment, she sat perfectly still, eyes closed, gathering herself. Victoria shifted impatiently. We're waiting, dear. May opened her eyes and looked out at the audience, no longer seeing their expensive clothes or judgmental faces. Instead, she saw her grandmother's small apartment, the old upright piano, and years of evenings spent learning the language of music. This piece, she said quietly, her voice somehow carrying across the silent room, was my grandmother's favorite to teach. She always said it showed both technical skill and emotion, something many players achieve one of, but few master both. Without further explanation, she began to play the opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. The first delicate, questioning notes filled the hall. Even those who knew little about classical music could feel the gentle beauty of the introduction, but pianists in the room recognized the piece immediately, several straightening in their seats with surprise. Victoria's smug smile faltered. May's fingers moved with increasing confidence, muscle memory awakening after years of neglect. The piece, built gradually, the gentle opening giving way to more complex passages. Her small hands stretched to reach difficult chords, her fingers finding keys without hesitation. As the music grew more intense, something remarkable happened. May's usually hunched shoulders straightened. Her face, normally arranged in a polite, forgettable expression, transformed with the emotion of the music. Joy, longing, determination playing across her features as clearly as the notes played, across the room. When she reached the first technically demanding section, a run of notes that cascaded like water, there was an audible gasp from one of the faculty members. Victoria took a step back from the piano, her face a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror at what she had inadvertently set in motion. May was no longer in the gala. She was no longer the overlooked office worker. She existed only in the music, her fingers channeling years of practice and passion that had been buried but never lost. The middle section of the ballad surged forward, growing more complex, more emotional with each measure. In the audience, a transformation was taking place as well. The snickers and whispers had died completely. Some listeners sat forward in their chairs. Others had closed their eyes to better absorb the music. Even the waitstaff had paused in their duties, trays held motionless as the unexpected performance captured everyone's attention. Director Joe stood transfixed, his expression changing from concern to wonder. Mr. Wong's mouth had fallen slightly open, his eyes wide behind his glasses. And Victoria's face had drained of color, her champagne glass clutched so tightly it might shatter. As May approached the most difficult section of the piece, a part that even accomplished pianists approached with caution, a few faculty members exchanged glances, clearly expecting her to simplify it or make mistakes. Instead, her hands flew across the keyboard with precision and passion, building toward the powerful climax of the piece. The music filled every corner of the hall, at times thundering, at times whispering. Those who knew the piece well could detect small imperfections, a slightly rushed passage here, a minor slip there, evidence of years without formal practice. But these tiny flaws were overshadowed by something many technically perfect performances lacked: raw, honest emotion that reached out and grabbed the listener by the heart. In the back of her mind, May could hear her grandmother's voice from years ago. Technical skill impresses the mind, but emotional truth touches the soul. Always play from your heart, not just your hands. As she approached the final section of the ballad, tears began to form in her eyes. Not from sadness or embarrassment, but from the pure release of finally allowing this part of herself to breathe again after so many years. The music had been waiting, just as Nai had said, waiting for her to find the courage to let it out. The final notes of the piece rang out, powerful and resolute, then faded into a silence so complete it seemed the entire room was holding its breath. May's hands rested on the keys for a moment before she slowly lifted them and placed them in her lap. She kept her eyes down, suddenly aware again of where she was and what had just happened. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Had she made a terrible mistake? Would they laugh at her presumption, a mere office worker daring to play such an ambitious piece? And then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to clap. The single pair of hands clapping was quickly joined by another, then another, until the entire hall erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, their faces showing genuine amazement. Some were wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the unexpected performance. May looked up, startled by the reaction. She had been so lost in the music that the return to reality felt jarring. The spotlight that had seemed so harsh before now bathed her in a warm glow as the applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. Director Joe was the first to reach the stage, practically bounding up the steps with more energy than his usual dignified demeanor allowed. His face was alight with wonder and something that looked like relief, as though he had discovered a treasure that had been hiding in plain sight all along. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice carrying across the hall as the applause finally began to quiet. "Truly extraordinary." Victoria stood frozen at the edge of the stage, her plan to humiliate having backfired so spectacularly that she seemed unable to process what had happened. Her smile had vanished, replaced by a tightness around her mouth that betrayed her shock and displeasure. Mr. Wong pushed his way through the crowd, adjusting his glasses repeatedly as though he couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. "Lynn," he stammered. "I had no idea. In 3 years you never mentioned—" May's cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "It never seemed relevant to filing paperwork," she said softly, attempting a small joke to ease the intensity of the moment. An elderly man in an expensive suit approached the stage. May recognized him as Dr. Huang, the Academy's most generous donor and a former concert pianist himself. He leaned heavily on a carved wooden cane, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Young lady," he said, his voice weathered but commanding, "where did you study? Which conservatory?" The hall grew quiet again, everyone waiting for her answer. "I didn't attend a conservatory, sir," May replied. "My grandmother taught me. She was a pianist before her accident." "Your grandmother?" Dr. Huang asked, his bushy eyebrows rising. "May I ask her name?" "Lin Xiuying," May said. A murmur spread through the older members of the audience. Dr. Huang's eyes widened. "Lin Xiuying? Of the Shanghai Conservatory? Who performed with the National Symphony in the 1970s before—" He trailed off, his expression softening. "Before the accident that damaged her hands, I remember. She was brilliant." "You knew my grandmother's work?" May asked, surprised. "My dear, any serious musician from that era knew Lin Xiuying. She was destined for international acclaim before the accident." He turned to the crowd. "We are in the presence of musical royalty and didn't even know it." May felt a lump forming in her throat. Her grandmother rarely spoke about her career, focusing instead on May's education and making ends meet. To hear someone else recognize and honor her grandmother's talent after all these years was overwhelming. "And she taught you?" Dr. Huang continued. "For how long?" "Since I was 4, May said. "Almost every day until I finished high school. Then I had to work, and there wasn't much time for practice." Professor Lee, the head of the piano department, joined them on stage. Unlike Victoria, who taught primarily wealthy foreign students, Professor Lee was known for his dedication to finding and nurturing genuine talent regardless of background. "No formal training beyond your grandmother's teaching?" he asked, clearly stunned. "And yet you played Chopin's first ballad with such—" He seemed to search for the right word. "Such honesty. Technical skills can be polished, but that connection to the music is something many spend decades trying to achieve." Victoria finally seemed to recover her composure enough to speak. "It was certainly unexpected," she said stiffly. "Though of course there were numerous technical issues that any properly trained pianist would not have made." A cold silence followed her words. Dr. Huang gave her a look that could have frozen boiling water. "I heard no mistakes," he said firmly. "I heard music, something that has become increasingly rare in these halls." Director Joe cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "I believe this calls for a proper celebration. Ms. Lin has shown us the true spirit of music tonight, that it belongs not to institutions or credentials, but to the human heart." The crowd applauded again, and May felt herself blushing deeper. All these years of trying to be invisible, of doing her job quietly and efficiently, and now suddenly every eye was on her. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Mr. Lee appeared with a glass of water, offering it to her with a gentle smile. "I told you this piano needed someone who could make it sing," he said quietly so only she could hear. I recognized your hands the moment I saw them. Pianist's hands, just like your grandmother's. How did you know about my grandmother? May asked, surprised. The old janitor's eyes twinkled. I've been at this academy for 40 years, child. I was here when your grandmother gave a master class before her accident. Some music you never forget. As the applause finally died down, Director Joe addressed the crowd again. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe our fundraising goal for the evening has been met and exceeded. Your generosity will help us continue to nurture talent like what we've witnessed tonight. He turned to May. Would you honor us with one more piece? The request caught her off guard. Playing once had been born of necessity and pride, but to play again, deliberately with everyone now watching expectantly, that was different. Doubt crept in. The ballade had been her signature piece, practiced thousands of times. Could she play something else without preparation? She glanced toward the back of the room, wishing her grandmother could be here. Then she remembered the jade pendant around her neck and touched it gently. Nai was with her in spirit, if not in person. I would be honored, she said, surprising herself with her own confidence. As she turned back to the piano, she caught sight of Victoria, slipping away toward the exit, her red dress a flash of color as she disappeared through the door. May felt no satisfaction in the woman's retreat, only a strange sense of gratitude. Without Victoria's cruelty, this moment would never have happened. Settling onto the bench again, May took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. This time, there was no fear, only a warm certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. She chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece of delicate beauty that had always reminded her of moonlight on water. The first gentle notes floated over the silent room. As she played, May felt something inside her that had been tightly coiled, for years finally release. The music flowed through her fingers like water finding its natural path after a long drought. In the audience, people closed their eyes, transported by the shimmering beauty of the piece. Professor Lee watched her hands with professional interest, but his expression was soft with appreciation. Dr. Huang dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief, and in the back of the hall, Mr. Wang stood with his phone held up, recording the performance, with a trembling hand. He had already sent a text message to a number May had listed years ago as her emergency contact. You need to see this. Your granddaughter is playing at the Golden Harmony Gala, and she is magnificent. The taxi pulled up to May's apartment building just after midnight. The driver, who had been humming contentedly to himself throughout the journey, turned to her with a smile. Big night? He asked, noticing her dress and the dazed look on her face. You could say that, May replied softly. After paying the fare, she stood for a moment on the sidewalk, looking up at the night sky. The rain had cleared, leaving the stars visible between the city buildings. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, yet everything had changed. Her phone buzzed with another message, the 15th since she'd left the gala. This one was from Professor Lee. Please come see me Monday at 10 a.m. I have a proposal. I believe will interest you greatly. The others had been similar, congratulations, expressions of amazement, and several invitations to meet and discuss her future in music. Director Joe had even mentioned a special scholarship fund for exceptional talent, his eyes twinkling meaningfully. It was overwhelming. Just hours ago, she had been invisible May, the quiet office worker. Now, people who had passed her in hallways for years without a glance were suddenly eager to claim connection to her. She climbed the stairs to the apartment slowly, her mind replaying the events of the evening. The cruel setup, the moment of decision, the music flowing from her fingers, and then recognition. Not just of her talent, but of her grandmother's legacy. As she reached their floor, she was surprised to see light spilling from beneath their door. It was well past Nai's usual bedtime. May inserted her key quietly, not wanting to wake her grandmother if she had simply fallen asleep with the lights on. But as she opened the door, she found Nai sitting upright in her armchair, eyes bright with anticipation. There she is, the old woman said, her voice trembling slightly. The star of Golden Harmony. May froze, How did you— Her grandmother held up her old phone, smiling broadly. Your Mr. Wong has been sending me videos, 3 of them. And then he called to tell me everything. She patted the arm of her chair. Come sit. Tell me how it felt to play again. May dropped her bag and hurried to her grandmother's side, kneeling beside the chair. Oh, Nai, it was terrifying and wonderful, and she couldn't find the words to describe the mixture of fear, pride, and joy she had experienced. Her grandmother stroked her hair gently. I always knew this day would come. Music finds its way out, like water through stone. Why didn't you ever push me to continue? After high school, when I said I needed to focus on finding work instead of music? Nai's eyes grew distant. Because my teachers pushed and pushed until playing became a duty instead of a joy. I didn't want that for you. She cupped May's face in her weathered hands. The music needed to call you back on its own terms. They talked until the early hours of the morning, May describing every detail of the evening while her grandmother listened, occasionally wiping away tears of pride. Finally, exhausted but happy, May helped Nai to bed before collapsing into her own. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. Instead of her usual gray skirt and white blouse, May wore a simple blue dress she had saved for special occasions. Her grandmother's jade pendant hung around her neck, a reminder of the legacy she carried. The academy halls felt different as she walked through them. Students and faculty who had never noticed her before smiled and nodded in recognition. A few even stopped to congratulate her directly. Your Debussy was exquisite, said one piano student, her eyes wide with admiration. The way you handled the middle section, I've been struggling with that for months. Mr. Wong was waiting at her desk, practically bouncing with excitement. Lin, there you are. Director Zhou has been asking for you all morning, and Professor Lee called twice. Oh, and these came for you. He gestured to a small collection of flowers and cards on her desk. For me? May asked, surprised. She picked up one of the cards. It was from Dr. Huang, the elderly donor, inviting her to tea at his home to discuss the future of real music at this institution. And there's something else, Mr. Wong said, his expression growing more serious. I need to apologize. For what? For never asking. He adjusted his glasses nervously. 3 years you've worked here, and I never once asked if you played. I just assumed. May smiled gently. I never mentioned it. How could you have known? That's just it, he insisted. I should have known. I should have seen something in how you organized the recital programs, or how you always seemed to know exactly what the music faculty needed before they asked. There was a musician sitting right in front of me, and I was too busy with spreadsheets to notice. Before May could respond, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway, Victoria Wang. The piano instructor looked different today. Her usual confident posture slightly diminished, her expression carefully neutral. Ms. Lin, she said formally. May I speak with you privately? Mr. Wang looked ready to object, but May nodded. Of course, Professor Wang. They walked to a small courtyard where students sometimes practiced in good weather. Victoria was silent for several moments, her eyes fixed on a distant point. I owe you an apology, she finally said, the words clearly difficult for her. My behavior at the gala was unprofessional and unkind. May studied the woman who had tried to humiliate her. There was something beneath the polished exterior, a crack in the veneer revealing something vulnerable. Why did you do it? May asked quietly. Victoria's shoulders tensed, then sagged slightly. Because people like you terrify people like me. People like me? People with natural talent. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper now. I've worked for everything I have. 12 hours of practice every day since I was 6. The best teachers, the most prestigious schools. And still, I've never played Chopin the way you did. She turned to face May directly. Do you know what it's like to dedicate your entire life to something, only to discover that someone else can do it better without even trying? I did try, May said gently. My grandmother taught me every day for 14 years. Just because you didn't see the work doesn't mean it didn't happen. Victoria, nodded slowly. I suppose that's true. She straightened her shoulders, composure returning. Well, I imagine things will be changing for you now. Director Joe mentioned something about a scholarship. Nothing's decided yet, May said. I have a meeting with Professor Lee this morning. He'll offer you lessons, Victoria said with certainty. And you should take them. Talent like yours shouldn't be filing papers. She hesitated, then added, if you ever want a second opinion on your technique, my door is open. It wasn't quite friendship, but it was something, a professional acknowledgement that would have seemed impossible just days ago. After Victoria left, May checked her watch. Almost time for her meeting with Professor Lee. As she crossed the campus toward the faculty offices, she passed the main recital hall. The door was open and she paused to look inside. The grand piano still sat center stage, now silent and waiting. On impulse, May walked in and approached it, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. We meet again, she whispered to the instrument. A sound behind her made her turn. Mr. Lee was there with his cleaning cart, smiling broadly. I knew you'd be back, he said. That piano's been waiting for you. Everything's happening so fast, May admitted. Scholarships, lessons, people who never saw me before suddenly wanting to help me. The old janitor nodded wisely. That's how life works sometimes. Nothing changes for years, then everything changes in one night. He leaned on his broom. The question is, what will you do with the change? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed with a message from Nai. Whatever they offer, say yes. It's time for your music to be heard. May smiled, touching the jade pendant at her neck. I think, she said slowly, I'm going to play. As she walked toward Professor Lee's office, her steps were light and sure. The path ahead wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in years it was filled with possibility. The modest woman who had hidden in the background had finally found her voice, not in words, but in music that could no longer be silenced.